Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone. We are Ob and Court, and welcome to EnvironMental Podcast.
Yep, this is our podcast where we talk about different aspects of sustainability and the transition to a more sustainable future. Thank you for joining us. If you love this type of content, please do not forget to like and subscribe.
Yeah, we'd really appreciate it. And thank you to our guest who's with us today. We are joined by Jon Scott, who is the Director of Corporate Relations and Legacy Giving at Clean Water Action. So thank you so much for being here, Jon.
I'm really excited, glad to have this conversation.
Yeah.
Our organization, Clean Water Action, works on, one of the most important global and U.S. environmental issues of our time. It sort of brings together a lot of the strands of things people care about. But I think we still are on the well-kept secret end of the spectrum. And so I love opportunities to sort of share a little bit more of our story. And in our conversation today, I'll probably be doing some speaking on behalf of Clean Water Action and probably just some personal reflection as well. So a caveat, if you're something you don't like, it's me personally talking about it, not the organization.
Pick it up with Jon.
Yeah.
No worries. But you were right. Yeah. I mean, what a scope for the work that you all do at Clean Water Action. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of, I don't know, I guess some of the day-to-day kind of boots on the ground, like what are you working on?
Well, there are couple different ways of looking at it. There are issues that are problems that people face related to environmental and health challenges. And we are focused just in the US, although anything that we make progress on or any new problems that we develop here in the US, there's going to be a global impact eventually. So
absolutely,
there's definitely global significance for what happens even in a single state or a single city, depending on where you're talking about. So I'll mention this first in terms of issues, and then talk a little bit, and you can prompt me with questions if you want, but I'll talk a little bit about some of the root causes of it.
Yeah.
So, all right, so water is our middle name. The organization was founded in the early 1970s. It originally and intentionally had a very, very narrow focus on water pollution problems in the US, because at that time, although there were some laws on the books, they were pretty ineffective and pollution was really bad. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area.
Okay.
And the Potomac River, which is the big waterway that flows through the nation's capital, was really smelly, had raw sewage in it. Fish were dying all the time in it. It was not an area that you'd want to go hang out next to. All the development that was along the Potomac waterfront was, warehouses and dingy industrial stuff, and there was a reason for that. So anyway, and there were serious problems. There's a classic case of the Cuyahoga River, which caught fire multiple times. It was pretty common for people at the beach or on some of our bigger lakes and rivers to see dead fish washing up on shore. I now live in New England near the Connecticut River, which was an industrial hub for northern New England.
Okay.
And in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, I've been told, depending on where you lived and what day of the week it was, the river would be a different color because of the textile or leather or electroplating activity that was going on upstream.
Wow.
And basically it was left up to every state and every business and every municipality to deal with the water pollution, either the consequences of it or the handiness of water nearby to take away the mess. And so the organization was founded to help document the problems and build a movement for advancing solutions. And the results included a couple of big laws that have sort of set the stage and created a vision for the things that we're still working on today. And those are the Clean Water Act, and then a couple of years later, the Safe Drinking Water Act. The Clean Water Act and our organization both just turned 50 years. last fall. So, and the work is not done yet. I mean, the goal that the Clean Water Act had a really ambitious goal, which is still a good one, which is ending all discharge of pollution into the nation's waters. Not quite there yet. It had some other goals that I think put that in more tangible terms. We want water that is fishable, swimmable, and drinkable for all people in all communities. And I like to think of that whole aspect, the water focused part of Clean Water Action's work, as it fits under. There was a slogan that emerged in the 1970s that we all live downstream, and that's certainly one way of looking at this. And even from a global perspective, we're all downstream of some pollution. And if you care about clean water and healthy communities, then you got to care about pollution and stopping it.
Absolutely.
I'd say, some of my colleagues, and I'm sort of in this camp, we update it a little bit and sometimes like to say we can't all live upstream.
Flip it. Yeah.
So that's the other way to think about it.
Yeah.
Because there are certain activities that are causing continuing pollution problems, either old ones that haven't been fixed or new ones that are emerging as science, discovers new problems. And there's two examples of those that are very, with us today. Old problem of lead, dating back to Roman times, still used in plumbing all over the world, still old lead drinking water supply pipes in the US. And there's now a process underway to finally replace all those in every community. And that's a tangible infrastructure improvement that's happened. It's a huge accomplishment, and it's just something. It's one of the things that the Biden administration has done really well, in contrast to their predecessors.
Sure.
Actual investments being made to improve health and quality of life for everybody. So anyway, so that's an old problem that's getting worked on and is finally getting fixed, getting lead out of contact with our drinking water. Makes total sense. It's taken a long time to get there.
Right.
It doesn't directly affect most people, but we should care about everybody's water. And so in that context, it's really exciting that's finally happening. And good jobs are being created along the way. People are learning the skills connected to plumbing trades and everything. So there's a lot of really good spillover benefit from that kind of investment. But the most important one is, especially kids are not going to be exposed to lead. They'll have more opportunities to learn and thrive. And they won't have to face the prospect of lifelong health challenges, learning deficit, all the things that come with lead exposure. It doesn't mean, just to be clear, it doesn't mean the lead problems have been fixed. Water is just one source of lead. Paint is another, and it's still out there. And so, our organization has worked on both. I mean, you can't care about it in one area and not care about it in the other. So that's an example of how there can be a focus on water, but if you really want to make progress on the health aspect for people, then you can't just limit your involvement to water. So another example, there's a whole class of chemicals called PFAS chemicals, PFAS, and they're ubiquitous, and they are in every human's body at this point on the planet. They're in the food we eat. They're in the stuff our food is packaged in. They're used in industrial processes. They're used in nonstick cookware. They're used in clothing that we wear. And so that's a problem where, the market needs to change. This stuff needs to come out of commerce. Maybe there's some essential uses where it could stay. But in the meantime, it's out there in the water. The Clean Water Act has a number of tools that can help clean up and address the problem. It's not going to solve it completely. And so that's another thing. That's another example. It's not a new problem in the sense that those chemicals have been out there in commerce for a long time. But it's new in terms of awareness and action. And the action involves cleanup, accountability. I mean, the polluters should be paying for some of the costs of cleanup. And also prevention. prevention of future exposures to this category of chemicals, but also prevention of making the same kind of mistakes with other new substances. Really, does it make a lot of sense that before a new substance gets introduced in a widespread way into commerce, we could be reasonably assured of its safety and the necessity for having it.
Yeah.
So those two examples embody part of what we do: address past problems, take care of people's health today, and also constantly be thinking about looking upstream to stop and prevent the pollution before it can happen, because ultimately that's the only thing that will work. So I mentioned water pollution. You can't work on water or expect to get good results on water without also working on climate.
Yep.
That's because the activity that is causing climate change, the burning of fossil fuels, is polluting our water. Yep. And climate change is making all kinds of water impacts worse. Too much water, too little water, right. More pollution, all kinds of stuff. And so it's actually a win-win that you can advance water solutions and climate solutions side by side.
Yeah. We've been having a lot of these conversations, and every single person that we've spoken to has said, water, we got to look at our water. We have to pay attention to how we're using it, how much we're using it, where we're shipping it to, how we're shipping it, and that I think Nick Steiner said something really interesting, which is that our infrastructure was not made to be efficient with water because we didn't think about it when we first made infrastructure. And now here we are, completely just blindsided. We're still working on this infrastructure. We don't know how to build it differently. And we're kind of like creatures of inertia in this way. It's messy.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, most of the water systems in the US and around the world are linear systems. They extract water from somewhere. We use it for drinking. We use that beautiful drinking quality water for flushing toilets, for doing laundry, for watering plants. And then we have a whole system that's designed to send all the used water, if you will, downstream and away. And surprise, the places the water is coming from are being dewatered, and droughts are happening even in places like New England. Water shortages and droughts. And so, there needs to be a fundamental rethink and a re-engineering of water systems. And again, that whole system is incredibly inefficient as well when it comes to energy use. So there's a lot of buzz, and has been for many years, around something called green infrastructure, and that those are water management solutions that tend to mimic nature. And one of the ways in which they mimic nature is through circularity. And so most of the real world application has been in managing stormwater. The old method of managing it is just send it downstream and away from your community as quickly as possible. Right. The green infrastructure approach is you create open space and green space, and have the ways that water can be retained and percolate back into the ground. But there are other examples of green infrastructure, including methods of supplying drinking water and treating human waste that are a little bit less linear and more sustainable long term. So I mentioned water, I mentioned climate earlier with the PFAS example, toxic chemicals in commerce and in our bodies affecting our health. There's a problem. Yes.
What is the process of removing PFAS from water?
Well, it's a low-tech way of describing the high-tech process is you're sort of filtering it out like with a sieve, but these are microscopic things, and the process of treating it to make it safe, that's going sort of above my pay grade. Sure. But there are ways of removing it from water. It's far more cost effective to keep it from getting into the water in the first place.
Totally.
Yeah.
So prevention is totally solution, but if it's already out there, you've got to clean it up too. And so the Clean Water Act does have a number of tools that our organization is working to get deployed to deal with PFAS once it gets into our water, and
Right.
it includes, at the treatment end of the spectrum where there are plants treating human waste and urban waste. That's also, that you have to have technologies that can deal with the PFAS, but there's other stuff other than that. So water, climate, toxics, and health. There's also a big suite of issues connected to single-use disposable trash, plastics in particular.
I have a question for you,
Sure.
and it's really just this is your opinion, right? Mm-hmm. Talking to Jon now. So I see, like, we're connected on LinkedIn, so you probably see the same sort of posts that I do, where a lot of countries in Europe and some states in the United States are sort of excitedly banning single-use plastic bags and single-use, straws and silverware, etc. And every single time, without fail, when someone is celebrating, we've stopped single use in this area, somebody writes a comment there and says, great first step. What kind of greenwashing is this? What, there's so much more we need to be done. And that makes me feel so doom and gloom. I see it all the time because there are really big strides happening there. And I'm kind of curious what your view of that is, like how you feel about, am I just like?
Well, it's interesting. And this is a thing the environmental movement has to deal with constantly that I deal with in my personal life. Is the problem the individual and their habits as an American consumer, or is the problem elsewhere? And does the solution lie with individual choice or collective and societal choice? And of course, that's a false question because the solution lies in both places. But someone who just recycles and avoids the single-use disposables, but can't find a way to engage in changing the policies that allow the proliferation of wasteful single-use plastic crap, there's a missed opportunity there. But here's how I think about it. Just like I'm a policy wonk, and so I like elegant ideas and beautiful solutions, and the ultimate sort of harnessing of economic and human behavior and everything to solve problems. That's great, but we don't get those in place they don't happen by having the best idea and then we win through spontaneous mass enlightenment. It just doesn't happen that way because there are vested interests, many of them, some of them even very well intentioned, that favor the status quo. No surprise there. I mean, our whole economic system favors the status quo, favors short-term thinking, short-term profits, all that kind of stuff. But similarly, you can't win by guilting people over their personal behaviors. And, we've got enough that we can feel bad about in our daily lives. We don't need somebody telling us, you bad person, you're wearing a shirt made out of synthetics, or you forgot to bring your reusable mug to the convenience store and you took a throwaway one with a plastic lid. So we need to build towards more people caring, more people taking action as individuals, but more people doing things together. And that's very challenging the way where our society is right now. But one thing that has changed, I'm sort of going to jump ahead. You can't win on any of the issues I was just talking about if the system that puts policies in place and funds them and gets them enforced is broken. And I think there's a case to be made that a healthy democracy will produce better outcomes for our planet than a democracy that's struggling. And right now, if you're a public official in the United States, 90% of what you're going to hear about environmental issues is coming from a special interest lobbyist who represents corporate polluters. And almost nothing you hear is going to represent what's coming from the people who are impacted by the pollution. The other thing is we're sort of a victim of our success. The clean water is a perfect example. We take it for granted. Our water today is a lot cleaner than it was 50 years ago. Is it fishable, swimmable, and drinkable for all people and communities? No, it is not. No. It's really far from that. And if we just, and in fact, cleanup progress has plateaued, and in some places it even started to decline a little bit. That goal of ending all pollution of our water is still quite a ways off. So there's a bit of a disconnect in our political system, and there are a number of forces that are distorting or poisoning our democratic process. And that's one of the things our organization works on, is rebuilding those connections. Most people don't know who their elected representatives are, or how to contact them, or why to contact them, or why it would matter. A lot of us have been conditioned to think our voting doesn't matter. Most people in the US have never called or written or emailed to a public official. We like signing petitions, but that's sort of the upper limit of what we're willing to do sometimes. And so we try to sort of break that mindset and educate people one-on-one in conversations like we're having now, but I might be knocking on your door or calling you on the phone. And it's interesting, if you ask people, do you want someone knocking on your door or calling you on the phone? They'll say, no, anything but that. We don't want that. When I do this, and I'm privileged to be able to do this from time to time, the end of a conversation is, thank you. Because what you're doing is you're breaking, you're having a sustained interaction, one human being to another, about issues we all care about. I mean, everybody cares about clean water one way or another. We care about it for ourselves, we care about it for children or grandchildren, for our pets, or just for recreational reasons, whatever. Everyone has their own personal reasons, but for most humans, it's deep-seated. I mean, the first 9 months of our lives were spent in suspension in water.
Right.
We are mostly water.
That's right. Yes. So there's a lot of reasons why people care about clean water in a very elemental way. And it's not, in most situations, if you ask people if they care about clean water and they think about it and you talk to them about why should we be concerned? My water is fine, that kind of thing. You could very quickly find areas of agreement. And that's one of the things I really like about the water issue. Climate is getting to be more of a consensus issue like that, but it's still, unfortunately, it's become politicized and polarized. So water is a great way of bringing people together and helping people find things they have in common.
Yeah.
My organization does grassroots education. We do organizing, which basically means getting people to do things collectively as opposed to on their own, and places and times when it will have a bigger impact.
Nice.
We bring communities together, not just communities of people living together, but sort of different constituencies and people with a different stake in clean water together in campaigns to change policy, to hold polluters accountable, to force corporations to change their practices, to hold elected and appointed officials accountable. Some of this is the fault of the polluters or the bad guys or however you want to paint it, but there are people too, and some of it's a fault of a system that is, as I said, somewhat dysfunctional and distorted by the way elections are financed, money in politics, the way policy is influenced through lobbying and insider influence peddling and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean lobbying is bad. If you call your elected official and say what you think about a thing, you're lobbying. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
Right.
So
and
they're
we
hearing
spoke
from you.
Yeah, we spoke with Sue Inches. We have another podcast from a couple months ago where we spoke with Sue Inches, who is an environmental lobbyist, and she just wrote a book about how you too can be an environmental lobbyist. And it's exactly what you're saying, get to know your community politician and talk to them about it. Have a coffee, write them a letter, communicate with them.
Right. And if you speak with a public official, they may tell you they want to do the right thing. Sometimes they can't do the right thing unless they hear from enough people who are telling them what that right thing is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So I would say fixing democracy and making the tools of democracy more accessible to all people is a really key part of the strategy for achieving clean water goals, health goals, human dignity goals. They're all climate goals. They're all connected.
Yeah, they are, absolutely.
Just as we need to be paying attention to and involving and allowing leadership from all communities. And I that's even a poor choice of words, the allowing leadership. I would say lifting up leadership is a better way of putting it.
That's nice.
And so the environmental community is learning slowly, and people who've been involved in it for a long time, like me, can get impatient with that pace of change. But it is really important that our community spotlight and be led and instructed by the voices of people of color, for example. And so the whole, it is a fact. If you're a person of color, you're more likely to be exposed to more pollution in your lifetime than
Absolutely.
someone who looks like me.
Absolutely.
And it's not just a function of economic background. It really is.
It's quite intentional.
It's a horrible problem, right? It's intentional. It's institutionalized. It's unrecognized.
Yep.
And it's something that needs continuous work. But the solutions aren't going to come from white people.
No.
And so, anyway, so that's a really other important part of the work that Clean Water Action does, is a focus internally and externally on racial justice. And I think there's a tagline that we created and have been using for our 50th anniversary, and I hope we continue to use it going forward. It's pretty simple. It's people, action, justice. So in fact, I'll just stand up and show you there's my shirt that has it on there. See around the
so cool.
And
swag.
Anyway, yeah. So anyway, I mean, those are some of the things. So what I've described is we do have policy expertise. We do work with lawyers. But at our heart, we are about education, organizing, and movement building.
Really
and we try to be strategic about it. We do it in the places where our involvement can make a difference, where progress in one place can lead to progress in other places, and ultimately state, regional, national, or even global change.
Yep.
And so that's a patient strategy, but you have, at times you have to be impatient and aggressive.
You have to push hard.
Yeah, and it's and you have to be, there's a spectrum between playing an insider game and an outsider game, and probably we're a little bit more towards the outsider game, but we don't do it on our own. We coordinate with others, try to play nicely with others. And again, it's not just other environmental organizations or other national organizations. We have to listen to and be led by the communities who are experiencing the pollution or the problems that we're trying to fix.
Yeah, absolutely. Where are you? I mean, I know that you're located in Washington, D.C., but I imagine that you have projects sort of all over the U.S. and talk to people all over the U.S.
Yeah. So it's interesting. We don't have unlimited resources. And so that means we can't physically have staff and volunteers and programs in all 50 states. And the US isn't limited to 50 states. There are also some very important territories that are on the receiving end of too much pollution. And I'll mention 3 that I've had the privilege of visiting. So Guam is one, Puerto Rico is one. St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Those are all places with unique challenges made worse by the fact that they don't have statehood or direct representation, but they're part of the U.S. So, but anyway, I digress. So Clean Water Action has members, donors, and volunteers in all 50 states, and I think most of the U.S. territories. That said, our programs are concentrated in a smaller number, let's say about a dozen places. And those are intentionally chosen because of the things I said, the potential for our involvement to make a difference, the ability to sustain our presence there through the funds we can raise from individuals, charitable foundations, sometimes business partners, and maybe sometimes to a very limited extent, some government grants that we might get. But so they're carefully chosen to be a place we can stay for the long term, as opposed to just jumping in and jumping out again, and places where we can make a difference locally and where that local difference can lead to larger change. Fantastic. And so we are in
super cool.
Yeah, so we're in the Northeast, we're in the Southwest, we're in the Upper Midwest, we're on the West Coast. Because so it's a good spread. I would like to see us be in more places, and I think,
of course,
we'll eventually get there. And I think our members and supporters would like to see us do more in more places too.
But it sounds like you're doing it responsibly, right? I think that the point you made about not going in and then quickly leaving, I think is a really important one, because that can again lead to very short-sighted solutions that are not too dissimilar from the capitalistic problems that started this whole thing. Just being
or it could be exploitive. Like we could go in and say, well, we think there's a good chance to get this kind of law passed. We'll come in and do that. Or here's a chance to defeat a horrible environmentalist who's horrible anti-environmentalist who's represented this district in Congress for too many years. Let's just go in there and do that political thing and then leave. That's not terribly helpful. I mean, it doesn't mean that might not be a good thing to do, but ultimately, I think people tend to care more about issues that affect them than about politics and democracy and elections. And so those are all politics, democracy, and elections are all essential tools, but they're a means. They're not an end unless you happen to be a political junkie like me. And so then I obsess about that stuff too. But and interestingly, again, for me, a political candidate who's good on the environment is likely to be good on some of the other things I care about. Because my definition of the environment isn't just trees and animals. Although I certainly care about that. It's also people and communities.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, we feel similarly. We don't define sustainability as just environmental. No, it's very much social justice, environmental justice.
Yeah. It's important. It's important to see all of that everything is connected and there isn't one solution. And everybody has to work towards it. And we say this a lot. And we've been, I think we were looking at it. I think we've been doing EnvironMental for 2 years now or something like that. And we're shocked at how much we learn from every new person that we speak to. And also how, even though every single part of our infrastructure has to change, how clear it is that there are people working on all of those changes. And it's amazing. And it's amazing to speak with you because, I mean, I'm from Flint, Michigan. Clean Water Action is a big deal. And I I appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate how long you've been doing it for. It's so important and so beautiful to see, like, oh yeah, this issue has been known.
Yeah. So there's still plenty ahead of us, and I'm actually I will just say I'm actually pretty excited about. I've been working with business supporters of clean water for not very long. That's not been an area that the organization has focused on. But I think there's a huge amount of potential in building more partnerships between businesses, the people who own and manage them, the people who invest in them, the people who work for businesses, and clean water action, if there's a good alignment of values. If it's not just something that's transactional, you give us money and we say you're great, that kind of thing. That's the traditional greenwashing thing. And so, but one of the distortions that I've mentioned in our democratic and policy process is when there are environmental policy debates, just like the public is usually not very much heard from in those debates, the business community that favors clean water or that values clean water and wants to see health and water protected, that voice is often missing. So a lot of the lobbyists who are, say, taking the pro-polluter side, if you will, to put it in really basic terms, those are coming from a handful of industries and trade groups. A lot of them you could trace back to the fossil fuel industry. Whether it's directly oil and gas or industrial agriculture, or the plastics industry, just to give you 3 examples. But there are lots of businesses whose products and services have nothing directly or obviously to do with the environment, who really care about our water and our planet and want to see them protected. Why? Because we need clean water. Well, some businesses need it for their successful operations, but we need it for our employees. We need it for our customers, and we need it for the communities where we operate, and the communities that we serve. And so that voice needs to be heard. And just like a majority of the U.S. population thinks the Clean Water Act is great and wants to see it strengthened, I think the numbers are come in somewhere around 75%. It's pretty high. We don't think about it a lot. We have to be prompted. Oh yeah, I care about clean water. But I suspect there's something similar in the business community. And the business community by numbers is more small businesses than big businesses, at least by numbers of people. And there's a great deal of political power in that sort of, once you get outside the top 5, 10, or 20% of businesses measured by dollar size, there's a huge amount of clout in everybody else. And so I'm excited about the possibility of finding businesses that agree with what I just said, or some of what I just said, doesn't have to be unanimity, who are interested in giving back, who want a place where their philanthropic dollars or money their customers might want to donate, or money their employees might want to give. And I'm saying money, there could also be volunteering aspects of it. There are other things like that. Those are things. Those are the businesses I want to find and work with. And so that's part of my job. Is that part of it is just to be, the person who responds if someone is interested in doing something with clean water action. But I think also the flip side of it is I want to find those businesses and bring them in. And we have hundreds of thousands of individual members in our organization. My guess is at least a third of those people are owners, managers, or decision makers at businesses. But we don't think, say my business, say I'm an accounting firm, I'm not thinking of clean water every day. When I'm thinking of giving back for my community, I'm not thinking about clean water necessarily. So I want to sort of change that. And I want to enlist many thousands more businesses who might support Clean Water Action with $100 gift or $1,000 gift or a $10,000 gift, or an entrepreneur who's starting up, whose business, again, may have nothing to do with clean water, who says, you know what, from day one, even before I'm profitable, I'm going to build that aspect of giving back into what I do. And I truly believe that businesses that do that, whether it's my organization or others, but businesses that sort of bake positive social impact and philanthropy into their operations from day one are going to be more successful.
Absolutely.
100%.
They're going to be more profitable. Yep. They're going to do a better job attracting and retaining top talent. They're going to do a better job attracting and retaining repeat customers.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And they're going to make the communities where they operate happier.
Yes.
And so
there's data to prove it. Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But you also have to communicate about it, which is why nonprofit partnerships can be an important part of that.
Yep.
If I say
that's also what we totally hear you. Like that's also what we do. We help businesses communicate their impact, elevate their impact. It's so important. It's such a big game changer when people start communicating about, oh, I've been giving to Clean Water Action, or I've been focused on clean water since day one and can prove it and show. And it's a continual conversation they're having with their customers and their investors and their donors. It's cool.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot of fun also.
Right. And I think, from an organizational or a nonprofit sustainability perspective, the more people and businesses you have supporting and partnering with a nonprofit, the more resilient the nonprofit becomes, because people's, the things you and I care about today, we might have a completely different set of things that motivate us 10 years from now.
Yep.
So I shouldn't stake the entire future of my organization and my work on one big benefactor. We need lots of them. We need the big benefactors. We need the big partnerships. We need, just, and to give you some perspective. So the businesses I work with, at one end, a couple of our partners have helped raise or given over $1 million to the organization each. At the other hand, we have small businesses that are giving $100 a month or $100 a year. And so there's room for all of that.
Absolutely.
And I'm just very excited about the idea of working, especially with new businesses and entrepreneurs who are building something for the ground up. I very much admire and love working with companies like, just to mention a specific name that folks will have heard of, like Patagonia is a good example. They've been in the news recently because they have transformed the company. The founder and his family have basically given up their stake in the company and made the planet Earth a stakeholder, which is a really interesting concept, which I love all of that. And I love the causes they've supported, and the sincere personal and business commitment that led to that decision. But that happened all 50, 60 years after the company started.
Right.
This big transformation. And so I love that, the potential going forward for that business and what they and their employees do with that incredible resource that they've made available. I also like the idea of building that into a business from the beginning, not necessarily a particular model that they've chosen, because there are many different models that could work, and probably including some we haven't thought of. But that's not really, I'm still learning on this. That's not something that's taught in business school. And in fact, there's even in the investing community of, say, investors who care about environment or social impact, there is a narrative out there that businesses that are starting up, that a sustainable investor might want to support, if they're making philanthropy sort of front and center in what they're doing or giving back, then they're doing it at the cost of actual impact in the real world from the products and services that they're producing.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true.
I don't think it's true either, but the original like definition of the green hush came from that exact issue of like people that don't talk about their impact because they want to be able to secure investments better. I think that's mind-blowing, but yeah, that is where that like concept came from. It was the investment community, which is kind of crazy. But now there are cool sustainable investors out there, and like we got to chat about investors and like hear about it, which is way over my head, but it's fascinating. There are people out there that are looking for that type of philanthropy. So I think you're spot on with, yeah, let's get started. Let's start businesses focusing on the good we can do in the world.
Yeah,
that's right.
Using that into their values. Yeah.
Yeah, and including the giving back. And I mean, even with well-established businesses, there is a, increasing pressure on businesses to do things like invest in carbon offsets and mitigate their climate impact that way. That's great, especially the growth that's happening in that sector. I would personally like to see some of those dollars going for climate advocacy and movement building around climate as well, because otherwise you're contributing to projects that may be helping solutions, but the core problem is still there and getting worse.
Yeah. They're very like reactionary, not proactive at all.
Right. And so I would like to see that happen as well. I think people buying and using carbon offsets is a great idea, but I think the definition needs to change a little bit so it can include not just tree planting or regenerative agriculture, but supporting climate justice campaigns and organizing, whether it's by my organization or others. So I think that this is an exciting time to be having this conversation and to be doing the work that I do. And I'm really psyched. I can say this because I just heard the news yesterday, and when will this podcast be airing?
February.
In February. Okay, so
this will be retroactive. Or March.
Yeah. Okay, so this will be retroactive when people hear it. But so one of the businesses that I get to work with that's just starting is going to be featured on a new episode of Shark Tank this week. And what's interesting about it's a woman-owned business. She set out to create a product that solves for an environmental problem. She's doing very well. She's been a generous supporter of Clean Water Action or Clean Water Fund, our sister organization. And now she'll be telling her story for a national or global audience as an entrepreneur. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. And I'll send you some information about it afterwards so you can maybe link to the episode or something like that.
Yes.
Because it's kind of funny. I mean, in a way, it's just sort of reality TV, that kind of thing. But it's an example of a person with an idea, bringing it forward, commitment to sustainability, and all that. So the whole package coming together. What happens in this specific case with this specific show with whatever celebrity investor? It's a little bit less important to me, but it's very exciting to see because we all want credit and recognition for what we're doing.
Yeah, and sustainability moving into a mainstream show like that is such a big deal, right? Like my family in the middle of Michigan, in the middle of nowhere, watches Shark Tank. Like they don't, I'm their family member, so I'm like raising the flag, but they don't, this conversation isn't surrounding them all the time, right? And then for them to see sustainability on their show, I might actually get a phone call about that, like, this cool thing, it's happening, it's coming.
Exactly. So anyway, I think the last thing I wanted to say, because we're talking about investors, when people think about investors, we tend to think about, in the industry, that it's called high net worth individuals or institutional investors, or people in the 1% of the 1%. The reality is we're all investors, some of us through retirement savings, some of us through the money we hang on to from one paycheck to the next. we're all investors, and I truly believe this idea of investing in ways that help and heal and do not harm the planet is something that should be available to everybody and should generate more prosperity for everybody. And there is a false narrative that if you are going to be a sustainable investor at any scale, whether it's $100 or $100 million, you have to be prepared to settle for a lower rate of return. I reject that completely.
That doesn't even really make sense.
Yeah, but even if it's true, do you really, if you had a choice between saving the planet and feeding your family, of course you're going to pick feeding your family. But you shouldn't be forced into a position of having to make that choice. Mm-hmm. And so one of my aspirational things that I work on both within clean water and outside is sort of making that. So there is a revolution in sustainability that is happening, a revolution in climate solutions. I want to make sure, and I think Clean Water Action wants to make sure too, that the economic benefit of that, the quality of life benefit of that, is accessible to and flows to and actually gets to everybody. It shouldn't just be the 1% or the people who are able to have a retirement savings plan through work. It should literally be everybody. And so that's the biggest challenge I see in sustainable finance, is how do you make that happen? Because our system is built around, whoever gets in there first with the most money and invests earliest makes the most profit and comes out ahead.
Right.
I want to push this whole topic area into a different way of thinking about it.
Interesting. That's very interesting.
And that could be a whole subject for a future conversation.
Right. Yeah. We'll have to research that a bit.
Yeah. I want to look into that.
Yeah. Cause even with the retirement accounts thing, again, I think maybe more people don't have retirement savings than do, but for the people that do, every single person that's got a 401k or something like that at work should have an option to invest fossil fuel free or sustainably, with a broader definition. But in fact, most do not. Most do not even have a sustainable option.
Or don't even know where they're
Yeah. So let's change that. Let's change that.
Talk to Breen Murphy.
The name of their company though,
he's a sustainable investor. I can connect you guys also.
They're working on building portfolios for people to switch their 401ks.
Their 401ks, yeah.
Right. Yeah. There are quite several good businesses doing that, including some of the big bad investment firms are doing it too, because they're bought into the premise.
They are being demanded.
You can be successful. And so, yes, you have to be a smart consumer and make sure you're picking something that is actually doing what it says it is and is as green as it sounds. But so that's an exciting area. And unfortunately, that whole field of sustainable investing is coming under attack in the US, and that's another whole conversation. And that's because the sectors and businesses that sort of don't beat the criteria of transparency and sustainability and contributing to solutions and thinking for the long term, they don't like the idea that there's a whole segment of the finance industry that is moving dollars away from them and into things that are more aligned with the values that most people hold as humans.
Yep.
Well, I think it's fine to make those guys mad if the work that we're doing. That's
yes. And it's important to be able to sort of talk about this stuff in plain language like we are. I mean, I think really we all want, we all want to know that our money is not being used for harm. I hope anyway. That's a core human value. So
I think that's something we care about for sure.
Wow. Well, Jon, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time and for letting us pick your brain a little bit, and for talking us through more about Clean Water Action. So if folks want to learn more, how can they find you? How can they connect?
It's pretty easy. Perhaps not by accident. If you just do an internet search for clean water, you'll find us near the top. But
great URL. Yeah.
But cleanwater.org takes you right to our website, which by the way is a brand new one. Looks fabulous.
It's beautiful.
Working a few kinks out of it, but it's getting better and feedback is welcomed. People are welcome to contact me. I'll provide my contact information. I'd love to talk with anyone whose interest is sparked by any of the things we've just been talking about. We'd love to have people come to the website, find us on social media. We're on, all the usual suspects, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And again, we're easy to find just by searching clean water. And, if you're a business person listening to this, let's connect. Doesn't mean we have to do business together, but, I want to build relationships with people who care about similar things or with people who disagree with me about these things. So
totally. I can attest that Jon is a great connection to have on LinkedIn.
Thank you. Yes, please find me on LinkedIn too.
Perfect.
And if you choose to follow me on Twitter, watch out because it's a lot of personal opinion.
Ooh,
you're ready.
Follow on Twitter.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much again, Jon. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you both. Yeah. And maybe we can have another conversation again in a few months.
I'd love to.
Yeah, for sure.
Great.
And thank you, everyone who stuck around and listened. We will see you next time.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.